Yeah, the Michael. So, after listening, my name is Terrence CURRY. I'm a professor at Tsinghua University. And since I agreed to do this presentation, I actually decided to retire. So this will be one of my last academic presentations. As I've been listening to the other presentations, I'm really kind of awed with the kind of creativity and the innovation that people are doing, especially related to how to use AI and advanced design tools to solve some very real social problems. I'm going to focus more. I'm a teacher. I've been teaching design for over 40 years, and I'm also an architect and a craftsman. I build stuff. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on the how people design, and maybe this will be helpful for some of you who are doing programming, and maybe it won't, but hopefully it will. I have this just started this new lab at Tsinghua in Shenzhen. It's both a teaching and a research platform for advanced design and building fabrication. It's equipped with state-of-the-art tools and equipment. It promotes learning by making and engages in design as a discovery process. Research areas include the production of housing and component-based and modular building and assembly systems, computer and robot-assisted construction, intelligent adaptive living environments, and materials research. The idea with this place is that it gives students the opportunity to walk away from their computers. I know a lot of you guys probably think that's a terrible thing, but we're going to get them away from their computers. We're going to get them to start using stuff, touching materials, because, we have bodies and we live in environments. This is, that's not ones and zeros. So we got to do something with that. Now, this topic of design as innovation is really interesting. I think some people equate good design with innovation. But in fact, good design is not necessarily innovative at all. You could have some of the best design in the world has no innovation whatsoever. So why is it considered good design? Neither is good design necessarily novel. However, it is true that good design is often innovative and novel. The trouble is that when the goal of designing is to be innovative, or the goal of design is to be novel, we lose our way. I would argue that the secret to innovation in design is not so much to aim at innovation, so much as it is to participate and engage fully in a discovery process. And that discovery process involves two things. It involves a kind of methodology that allows you to frame and reframe the problem and give some feedback as you're proceeding through it. And it also involves the ability to recognize a good design when you see it. A sense of design, as I would like to call it, it was coined by this guy, Gomez Perez. He used this term aesthesis. And aesthesis is essential to being a designer. It's a sense of design that allows the designer to discover design solutions that with that special something innovative, something new, something ingenious, and maybe, if I dare use the B word, something beautiful. Aesthesis is a kind of embodied knowledge. It's a knowledge you need a body to have. Computers are incapable of engaging in aesthesis because you need a body. It is a way of knowing feelingly. If one accepts that the proper end of design is the making of things for human use, which I do, and one accepts that the way that humans know the world is through their bodies, which is self-evident, then it makes sense that more than function, what makes for a good design is when the form does not follow function, but rather the form follows feeling. Before I get too far in this, I think it would be helpful if I made a few preliminary points. First of all, designing involves at least three types of knowledge. Declarative knowledge, which is conceptual, technical information related to the domain. Design is domain specific. We have principles of design that can bridge different domains, but in order to perform well in any specific domain of design, you have to be an expert in the declarative knowledge of that field. For example, I'm an architect. I needed to know a lot about construction materials and construction law. If you're a a designer of toasters, you probably don't need to know that much about codes, but I do. There's a kind of procedural knowledge that you need. This is a kind of strategic knowledge that is to how to define, structure, and frame and solve a problem. So the procedural knowledge is a kind of knowing how to approach the problem. And then there's a third kind of knowledge, and this is the kind of knowledge that I'm most interested in convincing you all that is important, and that is a kind of aesthetic judgment. It's a tacit knowledge. It's an embodied knowledge. It's being able to recognize a good design solution when it is had. Now, declarative knowledge dominates most of our curricula. You have to take structures, you have to take materials, you have to take building law. These are all kinds of conceptual declarative knowledge. Procedural knowledge in architecture and design schools is usually taught implicitly. You take a design studio and somebody walks you through the process. They usually don't tell you what to do and how to do it. They just give you a problem and say, okay, go ahead, solve this problem. And then they come to your desk once a week and tell you what you did well and what you did wrong. Aesthetic knowledge, however, is a sense of design. And it is assumed in most design programs that you either have it or you don't. Most people believe that aesthetic knowledge, this sense of design, is a God-given gift. It cannot be taught. In fact, I think most design schools will kick students out after the first year if they don't think they have a sense of design. I would argue that a sense of design is, in fact, learnable and teachable. A sense of design is thought to me to be, it's a sense of design is a kind of refined aesthetic judgment. It's the ability to know feelingly, and it is, in fact, a skill. Now, one of the persons that caused this big problem for us in design is this American architect called Louis Sullivan. And Louis Sullivan wrote this very famous and usually misquoted phrase. He wrote, "Whether it be the sweeping eagle in its flight, or the open apple blossom, the toiling of the workhorse, or the blithe swine, the branching oak, or the winding stream at base, the drifting clouds over all the coursing sun, form ever follows function. And this is the law." Did you know that's where that came from? Nah, you didn't. You thought it was probably written by Le Corbusier. Actually, it says it again in the same essay. He says it even more profoundly. He's more of a preacher, I think, than he is a designer. "It is the pervading law of all things organic and inorganic, of all things physical and metaphysical, of all things human and all things superhuman, of all true manifestations of the head or of the heart, of the soul, that the life is recognizable in its expression, that form ever follows function. This is the law. And thus the design of the tall office building takes its place with all the other architectural types made when architecture, as happened once many years, was a living art." What Louis Sullivan meant by form follows function is not a kind of utilitarian determinism which we have come to believe it to be. What Louis Sullivan meant by form follows function is that a thing should look like what it is. That's all. But we have subverted it. Now, since this form follows function became one of the dictates in design education, and since architects and students of design have been misquoting form follows function as a justification for a kind of technical rationalism that suggests that there is an inevitability of good design, if only the designer would be guided by the necessary relationship between form and function, then the design would be good. How many of you have ever sat in a design review where your professor says to you, "Yeah, but it doesn't function"? Or how many times have you stood in front of a professor and said, "Well, it functions. It looks like crap, but it functions"? If something functions well, but looks like crap, is that good design? If something looks fabulous, but doesn't function well, but there's a building on this campus that kind of looks to me like that. Is that good design? I think not. This dictate that form follows function as a kind of argument for the inevitability of good design that is based on a kind of exhaustive inevitability that if you understand the form properly and the function will follow. In fact, there is no necessary relationship between function and form, though there may be a connection between intended function and form. I mean, that's a knife. I'm using it as a screwdriver. Works perfectly well as a screwdriver, quite frankly. There is no necessary connection between form and function. What's this? It's something I can throw at Sky to wake him up. The theorist David Pye wrote, in The Nature of Aesthetic of Design, all the works of man look as they do from his choice, not from necessity. At best, the relationship between form and function is situational and to a matter of degree. Scientific rationalism is really what's behind this sort of full embrace of the sort of form and functionalism. And this embrace of scientific rationalism has led to a seemingly miraculous advance in science and engineering. It has, in fact, led us to amazing discoveries. It has led to almost a religious faith in positivism as it applies to the power of scientific rationalism and tactical rationality. Much of the work that was done on these premises to rethink designing in these terms. So during the 1950s, there was a big movement to try to scientize design. Why? Because we wanted respect. Scientists kept on criticizing us, saying, oh, it's too intuitive, it's too this, it's too this. If you follow the scientific method, you can come up with better designs. And more importantly, it can be computerized. We can get rid of you damn designers. You're too troublesome anyway. So they did a lot of work on this. And there's a guy, his name is Herbert Simon. He wrote this book called The Sciences of the Artificial. And then there's Christopher Alexander and his first book, Notes on the Synthesis of Form. These both exemplify this effort. These positivistic rational theories of scientific knowledge insist that truly scientific knowledge is gained primarily through verifiable observation and inductive conjecture. That is, as Karl Popper summarized, the inference of universal laws from the particular observed instances as a method by which we are guided to the point whence we can intuit or perceive the essence of the true nature of a thing. But the problem is with scientific induction, while without question has led to extraordinary discoveries, is that scientific induction is fundamentally an illusion. Karl Popper, probably one of the greatest minds in the century, argues that this misunderstanding of the meaning of inductive reasoning, that is, scientific method, is that universal truths can be revealed from a verifiable observation, is a fundamental flaw that is central to many noted thinkers, including Bacon, Hume, and Descartes. For Popper, due to the inherent limits of observation and human cognitive capacity, knowledge gained by induction is at best an educated guess that has the appearance of truth. Scientific knowledge, the scientific method, Karl Popper argues, can only provide you with knowledge that is gained by this method is at best an educated guess that has the appearance of truth. So what then is the problem with design as a problem-solving method? This emphasis on the necessity of technical rationalism to justify a design solution has over the centuries forced architecture students to become more and more engaged in a disembodied activity, more concerned with abstract concepts made of white stuff than actual buildings that embrace the fact that they are made of the stuff of the earth. White is ethereal. White suggests abstraction. Colors, materials, textures distract from the purity of the form. Isn't that true? When you make your models, don't you want them just to be white? You don't want to paint them a color. It ruins it, doesn't it? Don't you want to stay with a pure form? Haven't you reduced buildings into an abstraction? It has promoted a kind of Cartesian dualism. This quote from Polysma, I think, is fantastic. Fully generated designs may well project a seductive surface appeal, but in fact, they take place in a world in which the observer has no skin, no hands, no body. Similar to Cartesian dualism, where the mind has an existence separate from the body, the concept for a building has become separated from the building itself. How many of you are always told, what is the concept? You got to have a concept. If you don't have a concept, how can you design something? Well, let me ask you this. Do you have any idea what the concept was for this building? Yet, it's still a building. Have you ever gone to a place that you loved and felt wonderful while you were there? Maybe a piazza, or maybe an ancient ruin, maybe an old temple. Do you know what the concept is? No, but still, it has a wonderful experience. We have become obsessed with the idea that everything must start with a concept. I argue, why not start off with a feeling? Cartesian dualism, rationalism, is derived from the 16th century French philosopher René Descartes, whose famous phrase, cogito ergo sum, which means in English, I think, therefore I am. The simple meaning of the phrase is that if one is skeptical of existence, that in and of itself is proof that he doesn't exist. That is to say, Descartes says that your only real existence is your mind, that your body is secondary, that the only true truth is the conceptual truth. Now, here's a really interesting question. Where is the mind? Does the mind exist separate from the body? Many of you I know believe in that. It's a Christian belief, right? The spirit. I think also in ancient Chinese philosophy, you have an idea that there is a transcendent part of the person that continues to exist after death. How can you exist after death? You don't have a body. Where does the mind reside? The mind is nothing more than a description of human cognition. Now, for some of you, this may come as a surprise. I am, in fact, a Catholic priest. It's kind of a funny thing for me to say. It's something I have to struggle with on a regular basis. But mind is nothing more than a description of human cognition. This notion of disembodied existence is pervasive throughout the world. Mind-body, soul-body dualism, and disputing this and coming to terms with it, its consequences, lays at the foundation for much of cognitive neuroscience. Now, novice designers often think that designing is a kind of imposition of one's will on the world that results in an innovative solution. And while there is a kind of solution to this, it can be problematic. Designing, while typically associated with creativity, innovation, novelty, and normally taught in schools of design, architecture schools, and fine art schools, is fundamentally a kind of problem-solving methodology. Designing, properly understood, requires a problem to be solved. Not just any old problem. It requires a special kind of problem. And there's two types of problems. One type of problem is very well solved with scientific rationalism. And another kind of problem is very well solved by design. The first type of problem, well suited to the scientific method, has a lot to do with being able to clearly define the problem. And when you go through the problem and you come with an optimal solution, you can prove that it's the right solution by what? You can prove it's right because you can repeat it. Design problems are problematic. There is no right answer to a design problem. The only right answer to a design problem is based on how you approach the problem. I've just been told that I only have a minute, so I'm just enjoying this so much. This is more or less the way a design process will work, and it's a kind of an important thing is we set the problem space, and where design really happens is here. It's this framing and reframing process, and I'm just going to give you a little exercise for this, because how you frame the problem has everything to do with how you solve the problem. The answer, 2 plus 2. Anyone? You're smiling. 4. Is he right? Maybe. Is 2 plus 2 really 4? Or is blue 2 plus yellow 2 really green 4? See, it depends on how you frame the problem. See, he didn't see the colors. He didn't think the color was important. But as designers, we have to assess the situation. Color matters. Well, we could also get further and further into this. We can start arguing that, okay, sure, that might be true, but maybe that's true too, because different color 2 plus different color 2 might equal 3 plus 1. I mean, the fact of the matter is that really blue 2 plus yellow 2 only equals blue 2 plus yellow 2. That's actual truth. Finally, and I'm going to end here because I really have a lot of nice things that I want to talk to you about, but I'm going to end here, is framing the problem has everything to do with finding innovation. You have to define the problem and redefine it. And how do you find it and redefine it? Because when you're going along in design, you're creating something that never existed. And you get to this point in the design where you've externalized this thing and you look at it and you say, nah, that's not right. Now, how do you know it's not right? How do you know that? It never existed before. You know that because there's a kind of aesthesis, there's a kind of body knowledge. There's a way that you can understand what your intention is that is called tacit knowledge. And then what happens when you're going across it and it's not coming out the way you think it should come? What do? You go back and you reframe. And then as you reframe, you then continue to do it until it starts moving in a direction that gives you a kind of aesthetic resonance. And it's that aesthetic resonance that I'm afraid we've stopped teaching. And without a sense of aesthetic resonance, you can have AI generate as many objects as you want, and they're all going to look like crap unless you have somebody with a body who can tell you that is beautiful.